Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Data for Children Forum. This is a joint venture between 3 member states, Kenya, Mexico, and the United States, the UN Statistics Division, and of course, UNICEF. The goal of the forum is to serve as a platform for dialogue on what works and what can be further explored to make the data revolution for children. In other words, moving from data for children to data about children to data for children. We have a first-class lineup of data enthusiasts and experts for you, but before we begin, let's take care of some very important business, such as your phones. First of all, this time we're actually going to be, funnily enough, encouraging you to look at your phones. So it being a data forum, we have to. You can access the Wi-Fi with the login. You've got all of that on your sheets, and the password is Data for Kids. That information is also on your agenda. And we also have Pigeonhole, a very new, revolutionary, 21st century, cutting edge, what more could I say? It's all there for you on your sheets. Some people say big data will increasingly provide new insights to inform development efforts at a fraction of the cost of traditional statistics. This is the provocative question. If you have that on your agenda, please take note. What do you think? You go onto Pigeonhole, you log on, and the questions are there for you, 1, 2, and 3. It's more hype than hope. Data diversity will help us have a big picture. Stop living in the past. We need new tools. Are we ready for the results? It's going to go too fast. Can I suggest that we bring on the speakers? Because technology, of course, here's the thing. You've got technology in your hands, but we still need human beings behind it, right? And that's the essence of, in a way, what we're grappling with today. Essentially, that is it. It's about moving from data about children, as I say, to data for children. Jeffrey O'Malley, by the way, has got a brilliant blog on UNICEF Connect that you should look at. So whether it's a young teenager on the move through Hungary using data on her phone for a path to a better life, or a birth attendant in northern Uganda registering a birth. Or to paraphrase our executive director, who you're going to hear from in less than a minute, today's children hold tomorrow in their hands and increasingly in their phones. For the first session, we will address an important question that you now have on your agenda. So let me go straight to our esteemed leader, Anthony Lake, Executive Director of UNICEF. If I can call you up to the platform. And I'll call up as well, please, Amina Mohammed, the SG's Special Advisor on post-2015 development planning at the UN. And we have Katherine Getao, Ministry of Information from Communication Technology in Kenya. Do we have Katherine? No Katherines in the room, no Katherine Getao, sorry. We also have a change from Mexico. Excellency Juan Sandoval, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Mexico. You're very welcome. So without further ado, I'll hand directly to Anthony Lake. If you'd like to come up here, please. Thank you.
Whoops. Sarah, you stole.
I stole your speech.
My God, there is nothing worse than having your apparently extemporaneous remarks taken away from you at the beginning of the. Thank you, Sarah. We'll discuss this later. Sarah said that this was, and what a wonderful turnout, that this was a collection of data enthusiasts and data experts. And with me, you've got it, that's half right. And I am certainly an enthusiast, and I am certainly not an expert. And that's why I'm looking forward so much to learning from all that you'll be discussing over the course of the day. You also said that behind every technology is a human being. I am a human being who is so far behind technology that, anyway. But let me repeat a very, very warm welcome to all of you. including those who are joining us virtually. And I want to thank the co-sponsors, Kenya, Mexico, the United States, and our UN partners for helping put this really terrific event on. Today's agenda is built around our common commitment to giving every child, everywhere, a fair start in life. Data, collecting it, analyzing it, and then using it effectively is critical to moving us towards that goal. So when we talk about data, as we will for the rest of the day, let's remember that behind every statistic is a child or a mother or a father or a caregiver, a human being. And more important than data about children, as Sarah said, is data for children, the title of this event. Infobesity, infoxication, information overload. Call it what you will, we live in a time of unprecedented information. To put it in context, back in the 3rd century BC, the great Library of Alexandria was built to house all the knowledge in the world, perhaps a bit of hubris on their part. But today, the amount of information available is equivalent to giving every person on Earth 320 times as much information as was in that library, every human being. It's a daunting figure, but also a huge opportunity. An opportunity to extend the fight for the rights of all children, regardless of their circumstances at birth. So let me very briefly focus on 3 reasons why we have that opportunity before us. First, data tells us which children are thriving and which are being left behind. Disaggregated data is the prerequisite to action for equity. It allows national governments to shape their strategies and target their investments, and from community level to global level, then it also allows us to be effective advocates for all children. Second, data is essential if we are to improve service delivery and other programs for children. Real-time data helps us monitor program delivery, adjust our actions based on that data, and thus improve results for the most disadvantaged children. And third, we live in an era where data is not just about children and for children. Data can also be provided by children and by youth and by their communities, raising their voice and influence both nationally and globally. Who knows better than the community themselves what their needs are? Amplifying their voice helps democratize development in exciting new ways. Let me emphasize and amplify each of these points a little, but I'll be brief because I look forward to hearing our next speakers. First point, disaggregated data is the prerequisite to action on equity. We will not solve the problem of inequalities until we target the children in greatest need. Children with disabilities, ethnic minorities, children in poverty and conflict, girls. For it is those children, if given the health and the care and the education and the hope that they need and are now denied, those children can then break the pernicious cycle of intergenerational poverty. To serve them, we must know who they are, where they are, and why they are in those circumstances. We must count every child because every child counts. For the past 2 decades, UNICEF has helped 108 countries generate 279 surveys using the Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey, or MIX for short. Data disaggregated by wealth, geography, sex, ethnicity, language, religion, and age is critical to identifying inequalities. Household surveys such as MIX help us identify trends also over time, where we are getting better and where we're falling behind. For example, in 1990, nobody knew whether levels of malnutrition among children were rising or falling in Afghanistan, Ethiopia, or Argentina. Back then, we only had such data for 28 low and middle income countries, but today, that figure is 119. The result? More countries have evidence-based strategies to tackle malnutrition, so fewer children are stunted, and so more children can live healthier and more productive lives. And of course, data about inequalities is essential to our advocacy messages excuse me, on behalf of the children most in need. Our recent, I love saying this as if I knew what it was, hashtag End Violence campaign, for example, was powerful in part because of its hard-hitting data. Facts such as, think about this, 1 in every 3 adolescent girls aged 15 to 19 worldwide has been subjected to some form of emotional, physical, or sexual violence. A third of them around the world. Those numbers in themselves provide for us an urgent imperative to act. Data is also at the heart of the global advocacy campaign to end preventable child deaths, a promise renewed. Global data tells us that we failed to reach the key child survival targets in the MDGs. But country data tells us that 24 out of 81 low and lower middle income countries actually did reduce under 5 mortality rates by 2/3 or more, the goal. Such data thus helps us hold ourselves accountable for where we're failing, but also give us the hope that we need from where we are succeeding by breaking it down. My second point, data is essential for governments, the private sector, NGOs, and others to improve service delivery and other programs for children, especially the most marginalized who depend on them. Real-time or close to real-time data about program delivery helps us identify where we're falling short so we can focus on those areas. For example, real-time monitoring of supply chains helps the government of Laos know not only when life-saving vaccines will be out of stock, but also helps them respond with changes to the distribution schedules of those vaccines. And my third point, collecting and using data is not only about counting and being counted, it's about a greater voice for the marginalized and the democratization of development. Consider U-Report. Using a simple, low-cost mobile phone application, U-Report is now enabling over 1 million young people in 15 countries to voice their opinion on issues they care about and to report on conditions and needs in their communities, from disease outbreaks and teacher shortages to insufficient supplies in community healthcare centers. These young people are going from being simply the recipients of services to more actively shaping their own futures. A final thought. We gain value from data the most when we combine data from many different sources. Robust data from a census or a household survey is useful, but cannot be used for continuous program quality improvements. Real-time monitoring data has the opposite problem. It's not rigorous enough to drive major strategic decisions or serious policy shifts. Combine the two, and you get better results for both the short and the long term. Looking to the future, imagine what happens when we also look at monitoring data and robust data alongside big data analytics. There's no doubt that the world of data is evolving fast, and we must keep pace, even the data challenged like me. We must consider how instant opinion polls can better inform decision-making for children, or how tweets, Facebook comments, and administrative data can be combined to unlock new forms of information to help improve programs and services for children, while respecting, of course, their privacy and rights. I think a big challenge for the future. The possibilities seem endless. And that's why this forum is so important and timely. And as we prepare to usher in a new era of sustainable development goals, issues around data will become ever more relevant. But in all your discussions and in the future, let's always remember the children behind the statistics. The girl born into an urban slum, denied adequate nutrition and starved of the stimulation that her developing brain so badly needs. What chance does she have to reach her full potential? The answer depends on the informed action that we take individually and collectively. For if we use data well, we can give a generation of children, whether they're born in a slum or a conflict zone or in a rural community, more of a fair start in life. A start that sees them not only survive, but thrive and participate. And who wouldn't want that for every child, everywhere? So thank you all for your good work. What gets measured matters. So your discussion of how best to measure matters very much, and I look forward to hearing all the outcomes. Thank you very much, and welcome.
Sure, I'm not sure if this mic is live. Katherine, Getao, welcome you onto the stage. Thank you so much from Kenya. So for those of you who are more familiar perhaps with hash browns, including our esteemed leader, sorry for that. I mean well. Hashtag is in front of you, and I'll repeat it because I'm not familiar with the hashtag actually. It is hashtag Data 2015. And for the speakers, if you think people are being very rude and looking at their phones, they're just trying to make this hashtag, not hash browns, trend. So now I'll call upon you, please, Amina Mohammed, SG's Special Advisor, to give us a sense of the implications for the SDGs, the global goals on child-related data.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. This is the only basement I know that has this kind of energy. All the others across the road don't. So it's something to do with you, Tony, but also the commitment in this room to what is an incredibly important part of making this agenda work. So my thanks to Kenya and to Mexico and to the United States, UNICEF, and our UN Statistics Division for bringing us all together at a really good time, because we need to keep the momentum going from the success that we've just had and we're about to adopt in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to say that behind my data challenges, it's not just me. I've got 6 kids, so they always keep me informed, and they're over such a range of ages that everyone's got a different take on it. So I can tell you what they're doing is evolving really fast. We have had such success over the last 3.5 years journey that we've had. It's culminated in an agreement of 17 goals, and I think what was absolutely magnificent about it is that it was an inclusive discussion. This agenda doesn't just belong to the member states who wanted to own it coming out of Rio, but it opened up the doors to all the other stakeholders that before have had pretty sterile consultations on what we do as we go forward. So for civil society, even that was broadened, and we brought in the voices that were not always there. Business came in its different shapes and forms. Parliamentarians came in. So we've had really inclusive, I think, discussion that's given us ownership to this agenda. We've had lots of challenges about whether 17 goals are too many or too little, and I think all of us who've worked on and in development over the years would have liked to have seen 10 or 12, and it neatly fits into the work that we do. But it's not a very neat world, and we are facing a number of crises that exist and continue, and that's the unfinished business of the MDGs. But there are new ones that we haven't got a clue how to address, and every day we're drawing and digging deep on the solutions and the expertise and experience we have to try to address them. And I think what we see in the 17 is really people's reflections on this is what we need to address the backdrop that we're all agreeing we can see ourselves in, a universal agenda where everyone is inextricably linked. And so I think that, these 17 goals will be the investments that are needed to try to resolve many of the crises we have over the next 15 years. But we had something else that we fought hard for, and I think sometimes we forget about it because it got buried under some media banners that sort of distracted from what we got. And that was the agreement in Addis Ababa, the 4 A's, as it were, the AAA ratings out the window, it's 4 A's now, for financing, and fighting to have that up front and not chasing the money after, commitments to it, frameworks that really address the partners and the key issues that make it a part of a whole to development and not just pieces of it, I think was quite incredible. And it was a real stretch because we left New York going to Addis really not knowing what the outcome would be. And I think that perhaps one of the highlights of that, aside from agreeing on the framework eventually, was in fact the birthing of the Global Partnership on Data. That itself as well, a remarkable achievement where member states and the private sector, business, civil society came together to really say the data revolution means something and they're going to do something about it immediately. But in the forum of where we talk about finance, incredibly important, because this is not a spend people find attractive, certainly not our parliamentarians. Spending on what you can't feel and touch, intangibles, is not a dividend of democracy. They're there for a few years, and what they want to do is bricks. They forget a little bit about the mortar. So I think it was a strong statement to heads of government and some of particularly the ministers of finance that we had. But now we've done this 3.5 years, almost 4 for me, walk. We've got another 15 miles to go over the next 15 years. The actions that we need and the results on the ground will be determined by what we do in the first few months. I'm always trying to sell the transition to sustainable development, because conceptually this is a huge paradigm shift. The things that we have to do structurally, the things we have to do with the capacities, the resources, all the solutions we are bringing actually need quite a bit of work. And they need work in a way in which the UN itself needs to be geared up to help our countries. So when we send our leaders out the door, probably on the 30th of September, they will be coming to our country teams. They will be asking, the UN set this agenda, so what does it mean and how are we going to engage with it? And some of those first few steps that we take of not starting all over again, but integrating this to lift the visions and country plans and aspirations of countries will be absolutely critical. So there's work to do, and this is why I think, we've had such a huge demand on asking the UN, so what does implementation mean? What is it going to look like? I think we all know it can't be business as usual, and that's going to rub up against mandates. It's going to rub up against structures that we have and funding and finance, all the uncomfortable things that we need to be uncomfortable about if we're going to make a difference to this huge agenda. So it won't be the same implementation we've done before. We will have to find a way to respond to this differently. And we've been speaking about how do we become fit for purpose. So data for children is fine. There's another acronym, D4C. But F, as I leave here, fit for purpose is going to be key. And it's not just for the UN, it will be for our partners as well, because they've followed us down the road of the MDGs, and that has been relatively siloed. So I don't know if it's which UN, I can't remember which UN site it is, but there's a silo busters somewhere, and that's what we really need to do. The vertical is important, but really the integrated and the horizontal is going to be key. And so it is going to be about how we become fit for purpose. It is going to be a work in progress. We are going to be uncomfortable about it. It'll feel like a loss to begin with, but we will gain so much more because there is so much more to do. And I can tell you that because December 31st, I will go home to prove that what we did here over the last 3.5 years, we can implement. The data part of this is so essential. If there is anything that we take out of the conversation that we've had over the last 3.5 years, is that, where are the everyone we don't want to leave behind? What does it mean, evidence-based, to say a life of dignity, and that we are dealing with inequalities in a really deep way and not just using measures that stop short of actually mattering to people and to the environment. And so it is going to be essential to take the work that we started in the high-level panel, which talked about the data revolution, to the SG's report that tried to reinforce that, to the incredible work that, Stefan, are you here? UN Statistics are trying to bring together in a very difficult time with reinforcing that, yes, traditional data matters and we must invest in those institutions, data literacy, the funding for it on a regular basis. As though it were routine immunization, it needs to be routine data. But at the same time, taking advantage of what is coming in terms of technology and the big data, the data that allows us to have real-time feedback so that we save more lives and that we can touch hearts and minds of the politicians that really need to move that. But how does that become a partnership that respects its independence and what it brings to the table, at the same time can work together in doing this? That's another hard fit for purpose for you. So good luck on that one. We will try at the country level, but I think, what you lead and help us try to do is going to be incredible. So I do believe the data revolution, everyone told us it was already there, but it is here to stay. We're not there yet. We've talked about the necessity of it and what we want to do, and this forum is absolutely great, and an entry point to discussing this using children is incredibly powerful. But we still need the leadership to get the political commitment driving this over the next few years so that it is seen as a line item in everyone's domestic resource budget as one first charge that we do to make sure that our baselines disaggregated mean something. Accountability on this agenda. It's the one missing piece, so even as we gavel on the 25th, please don't forget that Stefan's work is not yet done. Indicators March 2016, but more importantly, how that comes together with fitting with the follow-up review mechanism. So the 4 components of the outcome document, that we set the scene, that we have the response in goals and targets, that we look for the means of implementation and the financing framework, incredibly important, mean nothing without the 4th part, and that's the accountability bit. And that, I think, leaving it to next year gives us much more time to put into making what we want to do as universal as possible. It's going to be different in different places, and I think that we certainly have our work cut out for us. But without that piece, we will not be able to measure adequately what we need to do in the lives of women, of children, of people, and what happens in our planet. The efficiency, what data brings to efficiency, how that makes sure that we are investing in the best place. So who was it? I came through the door and speaking about how we need to make sure that everyone is identified, and you've got a birth certificate for everyone. And I think that, these are some of the things that are important, because we are throwing resources at problems we know are there. So we know it's going to work somehow, but it's not efficient. We think there's malaria in every village, and so we put 100% of the resources there, when finding out that, in fact, the disease burden is not as bad because things have been working. So if we don't use data to efficiently use the resources that we have, then we are wasting so much of what we could, deploy to other sectors, as well as those that relate to health, education, and the rest of the investments we're asking for. The importance of the inequalities agenda. I mean, I know how hard we all fought, even though we thought it made sense to people, to have a separate goal. And yet that is across all the investments that we need to make. And that, I think here, data explains, evidence-based data informs and explains so much more explicitly what we mean. And I think that that's going to be a challenge that we will need to paint a picture really bright. I was looking at some of the slides that were coming up, and Nigeria was there, which was great, because the one thing that UNICEF has done for me in my country has been able to really get at the data, the baselines from the states, from the local governments. And, that's quite incredible when you look at a country like ours and a population and, institutions that are overburdened and don't have capacities. And it has contributed to the huge inequalities that we do have. There are huge challenges, and I think that we will all agree that even agreeing a global set of indicators is going to challenge all of us as a system, as the partners on the outside. I think we really need to make sure that we can get a good set of global indicators. The real indicator work has got to be at the country level. It's got to be where it matters most, where countries themselves can use those indicators to measure what they need to put into their budgets, but also whether they're working for children, working for women, adolescents, as we've added to the Every Woman, Every Child initiative of that. To look at the work of many pieces of work that have been done, not to lose them. I hope we won't lose the enormous amount of work that's been done by this forum, by SDSN, by the statisticians, and that we harvest it going forward. We know that disaggregated is going to be essential. We know these institutions have to be really reinforced. But how do you make that not just a budget item that you don't know what happens to it? I think we need some more work on what we mean by strengthening institutions. Goal 16 is wonderful because it really does not just talk about peace and the rule of law, but for the first time, we need institutions to deliver services that not people deserve. I keep seeing sentences in some speeches that say, people deserve this. Actually, people have a right to it. And I think that reinforcement means that we need to structure better and communicate to a parliamentarian what it means and what expectations they should have when they make an investment in an institution. And what should it be for? What's the spend for? Is it data literacy? Is it equipment? What is it actually for? It's a very difficult one. I certainly know when we were spending $1 billion a year on trying to achieve the MDGs, we were trying to also make a difference in public expenditure reform, and that really was about plugging the leaking pipelines of resources. But we were also trying to do public sector reform, and that was really difficult to know what did we mean by the modules to train people, to build capacity, to strengthen institutions. So some thought there, I think this forum could do a whole load to try to address that challenge. that our follow-up review mechanism has more clarity and is not burdensome. Right now, the discussion at the high-level political forum does not bring clarity. Let's hope that countries are not faced with a cacophony, that somehow we can make a symphony out of this, that we're very clear about the level at which we begin to report strengthening the country, what the regional role is, and how all this comes up at the global level and comes back down, doesn't just go up to heaven and doesn't come back down. We need it to come back down so that we can learn from what we're doing and we can push for those gaps to be filled. I think it's really important that the ownership at the country level is deepened, and that we really reinforce the access to data and the use of data, both traditional and non-traditional, and that this becomes, all of these I think we can achieve and we can overcome, but it will require partnerships. And I think the way in which slowly the Global Partnership for Development is evolving is a good sign, but so much more needs to be done. Partnerships even within government, talk less of the ones that are on the outside, even within government need to be established, as we well know the challenges that we have within the UN system. When we talk about data, we had incredible support from UNICEF and UNDP on the panel that the SG set up for the data revolution. But it's hard. It's hard to bring everyone together who's doing this work so passionately and everyone's right. How do we bring more coherence to that partnership and then help countries? Finally, I think that we have to continue to underscore that when we talk about the measurements, that we are going back to that it is about what we do with the poorest, youngest, smallest, most vulnerable member of the family. Whether it's the family or the society, the community, the country, the world, that's where we need to start. If we don't do that, then I think we'd have missed the litmus test of leaving no one behind and reinforcing that children do matter. And UNICEF's role in this is critical. The leadership that we've had from you need to reinforce 100 times over, because this is so much bigger. The universal agenda is bigger, but the context is more complicated. And I think that we should have to scream out loud at the other two pillars in the United Nations across there, particularly the peace one, that we need peace. And that the three pillars stand up together. And we've done a really good job at doing something for sustainable development on the development pillar, but we need the other two for us to stand up. And the context I know we are challenged by, and I think let's keep reinforcing that more investments in the root causes mean the 17 goals. Not the Band-Aids that we put on things and the emergencies that we have to deal with. They are there for us and we need them, but we need to make them history. And it's about dealing with the root causes for this. I'm just going to end on my story, because I did see Nigeria up there. And 10 days ago, I was in Nigeria, and I do come from the northeast of Nigeria, and went to school in Borno, in Maiduguri, where Boko Haram has found its home. And I traveled by road from my home in Gombe to Maiduguri. The first thing I had in Gombe was to see IDPs, not in camps, but in our communities, and to see where we had compounds that were led, because it's the glue that keeps us together, by the elderly, that they were not on the outside of it, and that was a sign of hope. It needs much more investment. The old man that was heading the community of about 35, or the compound of about 35 I saw, was 105 years old. But what I saw that really said to me the light at the end of the tunnel is very bright was that these communities who had gone through so much, mothers and fathers, young and old, in the same compound, were Muslims and Christians, and they came across different cultures. What they didn't have was a spotlight on where were they, who are they, and how do we invest and make sure that they don't remain on the periphery of my town and then are put back again in a place where they're excluded, and it regenerates everything that's the root cause for us of the terrorism that we've had over the last few years in Nigeria. Moving along the road to places where, yes, villages were deserted, but what I did see in the ones that were not deserted, that they were not going to be victims, that girls and young women and men were in the marketplaces, were in school, and they were trying to recover and rebuild their lives in spite of it all. And that's where I really see the reflection of the SDGs, of governments that want to focus on that and want to rebuild, and that much of what we talk about today is about that long road to recovery, building back communities together. And they do have the resilience to try to make it, but they need our help. And in saying so, I have to tell you, 70% of those that I saw were all under the age of 15. And that, for me, made it so much more personal that when I come to a forum like this, we must know who we're counting. and we must know where they are so that we can make the investments that actualize their rights and their aspirations. Thank you very much for letting me speak this long.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Mohammed. And for re-emphasizing that rather arbitrary line between humanitarian and development work, which of course the Executive Director also made in his speech to the board this week. It's wonderful when you have a room like this, and we're at the UN after all, and you hear the word revolution. It somehow sends chills up your spine. It's not something you hear an awful lot of the time in the hallowed halls of the UN. Now we've got another wonderful word, power. The power of data, and a short video to show you what it looks like. Please go ahead with the video.
How do we solve the biggest problems in the world? Where do we begin? Data. Data is knowledge, and knowledge is power. At UNICEF, we use data to drive change. We use data to identify issues affecting children. We use data to understand the scale of problems. Data shows us how far we've come in making children healthier and safer. Data shows that far too many are left behind. More than 30 million girls of primary school age are not being educated. About 16,000 children die every single day, mostly from preventable causes. Our data pushes policymakers and communities to take action. At UNICEF, we don't take numbers for granted, because every child counts.
Thank you very much. We go straight on to our next speaker from Mexico. Our Deputy Representative, please come up. Deputy Representative to the UN mission from Mexico, Juan Sandoval. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, Mr. Anthony Lake. Amina, my dear friend, Mrs. Katherine, it's a pleasure sharing this panel with you. Mexico welcomes this opportunity to host this forum in a joint effort with Kenya, the United States, and UNICEF. This is an invaluable opportunity to step up our commitment to the rights of girls and boys. The 2030 Sustainable Development Goals are set to be the roadmap for socioeconomic development in the next 15 years. The outcome document that we have demonstrates an ambitious commitment by all member states to make development accessible to all our citizens, and especially to children. In this endeavor, we must recognize the central role of data. Basically, I mentioned that the SDGs are the roadmap for development going forward. And I think that Amina just mentioned something extremely important, that is ownership. I think that during all this negotiation, and while we were finding some obstacles or differences of opinion, the factor of ownership, because the SDGs belongs to every country, which is extremely different, and that makes the real difference at the beginning from the MDGs. They were the result of a negotiated process. So the SDGs belongs to all the international community. Data is our compass in these roadmaps. However, we need to have data that is unique to children because their needs are particular with respect to other members of our societies. Furthermore, state obligations to children are also differentiated while we have real data on children. Mexico recognizes that data is a powerful tool, just as UNICEF just mentioned. It reveals gaps and inequities and the uneven distribution of development, allowing us to shape policies for specific realities and groups across geographic regions, gender disparities, and educational levels. In all cases, the primary beneficiary is always the same, those the most vulnerable. For this reason, I want to commend UNICEF for making social inclusion a cross-cutting priority in all of its programs. The commitment by Mexico to ratify the Convention on the Rights of the Child and other treaties and declarations regarding the welfare of the children implies the implementation of active policies that guarantee the exercise of the rights of children and adolescents. The enforcement of these rights requires accurate, reliable, and accessible information on the situation of the rights of children and adolescents. Proper identification of children and adolescents who are especially vulnerable is essential to provide the necessary attention. This involves the creation and implementation of information systems, observatories, and monitoring mechanisms at the national, regional, and international levels. Simply put, how can we use our roadmap if we have no idea where we are? We certainly need this diagnostic. Mexico participates in this forum in order to contribute to this important discussion, but also to learn from the experiences, good practices, and lessons learned in other countries, allowing us to strengthen national actions in this field. And I would like to share with you something especially important, which is, where are the lessons learned? What have the MDGs gave us? And this is extremely important, because maybe it took us with MDGs maybe like 5 years to discover what we were going to do with this package, because there was no roadmap. We had no ideas. We were totally lost countries. In the Mexican case, essentially, it took us between 6 and 7 years to begin a real implementation and following up. Where is the lesson learned here? We found that the most successful story for obtaining data is to have as the head of the national system located in the office of the president. If you give, as a country, the task of collecting data to one of your ministries, it's going to be a mess. You have to give the highest political visibility to your social data collection, and it's something that in Mexico we learned. And it took us quite a while doing that, but we have a wonderful result. We are extremely proud of it. I do remember in 2011 when we came with the contact group trying to know with Japan what we're going to do with the MDGs or the SDGs, or what we will do after all those years. We came if we just present our system in the most candid way. We were just trying to share what Mexico was doing, and we received a prize, like having the best system ever. And say, well, it took us a while doing that. We had no idea at all what other states were doing, and it's something that we have to change this time. But that's a very important lesson learned about giving political visibility to your data collection. In Mexico, there are about 40 million children and adolescents under 18 years old, almost a third of our population. In this sense, it is clear that having disaggregated data to monitor progress in fulfilling the rights of children and adolescents must be an horizontal effort. We must involve all areas of public life, not just institutions dedicated to collecting data or child protection. We also believe in disaggregated data, in the administration and procurement of justice, education, and social programs, just to name a few areas. I am also proud to share with you that in Mexico, we are working to strengthen our data collection systems in concert with international partners. The experience of the MDG are the real base for doing this now. The recently published General Law on the Rights of Children and Adolescents in Mexico provides for the creation of a comprehensive national information system on child protection. Something additional that we did, and I would like to share it with you very shortly. We create our data collection institutions with a totally autonomous character. They are suggested by the executive power, but they have to be ratified by the Senate. Both our national system of statistics is an autonomous body who doesn't belong to the government. And even though, and even deeper, we create the Coneval, the national institution for assessment of social expenditures and for social programs. Everyone says that is absolutely suicidal, because when everybody thinks, and the politicians think that everything is going wonderfully, and they're saying we have established 50 programs with national coverage, millions of people totally covered, and then it comes the autonomous body assessment, and they tell you, yes, you did wonderful programs, but the poverty increased in this country with all your wonderful programs. So, and they say, well, something's wrong. We have to change that. Maybe for many countries, especially for all those who are the kings of makeup, numbers, it's absolutely suicidal. In Mexico, well, we did it that way. There is no way for suspicious on data, and the reality is just there. And it's the best way if you really have a real commitment in social change. You must to see yourself reflected in the mirror of truth. And this is what we're doing. It's tough, but we're doing it. One important of our system, it would be, and the one that we're going to create, it is going to be interoperable with other national systems. Sets of data need to speak to each other. The forthcoming Mexican system for children will provide information on the legal family status, identify minors subject to adoption, allow systematic collection on statistical data of children and adolescents with disabilities, and incorporate databases of migrant children and adolescents, even those migrant children that we don't know where they're coming from, and you know the flows that we suffered last year, and it was something absolutely unexpected, that it was a surprise for everyone, even for this country. The system that we are developing would not have come to be without the participation of the international community. We expect that the results of this comprehensive national system will assist Mexico in positively responding to the recommendation and collection of disaggregated data made by the Committee of the Rights of the Child in the 4th and the 5th reports to that body that we have already presented. Finally, to conclude, data makes it possible to save and improve the lives of millions of children, especially the most vulnerable. In the development era before us, the first unavoidable obstacle to overcome is how to appropriately collect, analyze, and use the information to translate it into a concrete contribution for the well-being of children. Progress towards the SDGs will be known through data, and through data we shall make informed and objective decisions. This is totally essential. But I will tell you another message maybe for international agencies while we're at the UNICEF. I don't want to mention, and it's not anything against UNICEF, it's in general comment on the international agencies. How much are we spending in collecting this data? Because maybe we're going to spend millions in wonderful international programs to know how poor they are. But if the money to obtain that information were given to real in the term programs, maybe you will change the lives of that people. So sometimes, I know it's contradictory for what I'm saying. It's absolutely important having data. Just keep an eye on how much money we're spending. Don't spend millions who are needed by communities on having wonderful, colorful reports who cost millions to the international community. And don't spend, I say that many times, don't spend $2 million in your report when you are reporting $100,000 program. Thank you very much.
Nothing like data to keep us honest, but hopefully not suicidal. And important and sobering words, thank you so much. Now to call on Dr. Katherine Getao from Kenya, the Information, Communication and Technology Ministry in Kenya, to talk about really the experience in Kenya and mobilizing the potential of technology to make the data revolution work for children. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Lake, and thank you for summarizing the breadth and importance of this agenda. Amina, Mohammed, very practical and reminding us why we're doing all this. And my colleague, Jorge Montaña, for emphasizing the importance of data governance in this agenda. And to all of you, because I've been looking at your faces, and I can see you're not just here because your boss sent you here, but there's a lot of passion and attention, and I believe you're all here because you care about this agenda. Good morning. So I've just spent, I've been here for 3 days. So the first 2 days I was at a cybersecurity forum. And there I could see a lot of tension as we tried to see how the whole world could protect this common resource. And there were many tensions because there was a tension between human rights and security. There was a tension between clients and suppliers, and between many other interest groups whose interests are different. But I believe that there's one wonderful thing that brings us all together as humanity, and that is the care and protection of our children, because we all know that that is the survival of this species. So on this, we can all agree. And as I thought about this agenda, and Kenya is very proud to be a co-sponsor of this agenda together with Mexico, it appeared to me that there were at least 2 important reasons why we must grapple with this issue of data. One of them has been very clearly put by my predecessors, and that is that every child counts, and we must deliver to them what they deserve in the most efficient and effective way possible. And this is only possible if we have the data. But I think we also have to recognize that today children live in the world of data. So it's not only data for children, but it's also data of children and by children. And especially in my country, this is the thumb generation. They live in data at least 18 hours a day, possibly more. And we are grappling with new issues as a result of this. So I'll spend probably more time telling you maybe what's happening in Kenya, because as a result of our desire to protect our children and make them count, the public sector, the private sector, NGOs, international organizations are all addressing this issue of children. And there are also broader issues taking place that are also working towards this goal. Firstly, Kenya has had the goal of making sure that the whole country is connected, and especially connected with optical fiber. And this infrastructure now reaches about 70% of our counties. They're about 5,000 kilometers and increasing every day. Obviously, it's difficult to collect the data if we use the 20th or 19th century methodologies. We also, from 2010, have had a new constitution, which has obliged us as government to make information readily accessible to our citizens. And we're very, especially at my ministry, very cognizant of this responsibility. Our long-term development vision 2030 recognizes the central role of children and also recognizes the role of technology as an enabler in helping us to meet our development goals. And of course, maybe what provoked the invitation of Kenya to be a co-sponsor, we have a successful open data initiative where public sector data is being shared over the internet through a portal. The last thing I'll mention is birth and death registration, because I think somebody has already mentioned the importance of knowing who our children are, where they are, and how they are. And what we have done, building on the MDG, which motivated the Kenya government to provide universal and free primary education, is we have connected that with birth registration, because now the only requirement really for you to join primary school is that you come along with your birth certificate. And so for a long time, birth registration in Kenya had hovered around 55%, but now it's rising rapidly because as children enter school, we are ensured that they are registered in this way, and there is a drive to automate all this data. Now, I'll mention a few other initiatives of note, and I will link them with the Sustainable Development Goals, beginning with the third SDG, which is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. The government of Kenya is now transferring Social Security cash especially to orphaned and vulnerable children. Now, one of the things that was found was that there was multiple institutions which were involved in this effort, and this created some gaps and also some confusions about who should receive this support. So now a single database has been built, and this initiative is also built around an automated debit card where the money is transferred to make sure that it also gets to the right person, because it's a countrywide program, and you know the difficulties of distributing cash. This is being done by the Ministry of Labor and Social Services. Also, the same ministry has provided a toll-free number for children in need. And as I told you, this is the data generation, because we would have been cynical about whether children would actually call such a line. But they are receiving a large number of calls, both from children and also adults reporting cases where they have noted that there is a vulnerable child or a child who is at risk. Finally, I'll mention a private sector initiative. It's called Total Health. And, sometimes we talk about from birth to death, but we also talk about before birth to death, because the actions or the behavior of the mother, even before the child is born, can give the child a good start in life or can actually destroy that. So what Total Health does is it enables pregnant women to register using just simple text messages, and they can be reminded about vitamins, about all the things they need to do in order to make sure that they have a healthy pregnancy. And it also does alerts to remind them about their appointments and the things they need to do. And you'd be surprised that this has found credence with very poor women, but also with affluent women. And many women are saying, I've learned a lot from this because I wasn't aware that there was so much that I needed to know in order to ensure that I have a healthy child. Then the SDG 10, to reduce inequality within and among countries. We have, of course, the famous digital literacy program that is going to distribute ICT equipment and content to children in all primary schools in Kenya, beginning with the youngest children, that's years 1 to 3, will be receiving content. Yeah, and this creates equality because actually textbooks and other educational materials are quite a burden to the poorer Kenyan families, and the fact that now they'll get this content is quite a step in the right direction. The private sector also has a number of programs to encourage innovation using ICTs in young children. Then SDG 11, to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. We have a public-private partnership called Be the Cop, and this is to help people report abuses. Many of our children actually have mobile devices. They have internet-enabled devices, and of course, they get access to all kinds of information, which perhaps they're not very well placed to assess its quality or its benefit to them, or lack of benefit. And therefore, they're both training schools and children and parents about what they should do, but at the same time, it's also a reporting mechanism so that the bad content can be made inaccessible to the youngest members of society. There's also the Center for Missing Children, which is collecting and sharing information on missing children in Kenya using various media. Before, they just used to publish the pictures and the names in the newspaper, but now it's possible to have them there all the time, because of course if it's just in one newspaper in a while, you can actually miss the information. But when it's on electronic platforms, then it's much easier for parents and guardians to search for their missing children. So these are just a few examples, and I have with me here Kaburo, where are you? Can you wave so that everybody can see where you are? Yes. So if you want to have a conversation about what's going on, she's also a very good person to talk to tell you about the multiple initiatives, because I've just given you a flavor. Now, finally, what would we like to come out of this meeting? I believe that it's very important to maybe see how we can collaborate together on the issue of open data and creating data frameworks so that we know how to share these data. What kind of data should we be collecting about children? How can the private sector contribute? What should governments make public and what should they keep private? Those are some of the conversations we'd like to see so that we can strengthen both our open data initiatives with children's data, and we do have some data there on children, although it's not a great deal, but it's growing. But also the things that have been raised by my colleagues about making this practical, about creating a governance mechanism that makes sure that it is taken with the proper weight and that it is sustainable. These are some of the things that we would love to see come out of this meeting so that we can make it a practical agenda that will help us do what we are already trying to do better and more effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Getao. That's quite a thought. Be a cop. You hope it's a good cop, right? So you heard earlier the really picks up, I think, on what the Deputy Representative of Mexico was saying about the use of finances and traditional statistics, whether you're going to be using more money to gather data or not. So to repeat the question, the provocative question was, some people say big data will increasingly provide new insights to inform development efforts at a fraction of the cost of traditional statistics. What do you think? Do we have the responses? Let's go live to our dynamic team at the back there. We have the answers. The first question was, it's more hype than hope. We had only 17% who believed that. Well, that's good. That's at least we're spending our money wisely. 2, data diversity will help us have a big picture, get the big picture. 62%. Wow, well, that's great. Okay, 62%. Thank you very much. Shows we are doing the right thing. And finally, stop living in the past. We need new tools. Well, we shouldn't ignore that response either. But good to know, good data. And for those who are plugged in, keep those pigeonholes working and the hashtags, and leave the hash browns for breakfast. Okay, thank you very much. We'll have a coffee break now and see you in 25 minutes. Thank you very much.